Well, this is a subject I thought I knew a little bit about, but as it turned out when I was studying it, I didn't really know that much at all. And it's like everything, when you prepare for these kind of talks, you learn more than you would ever learn normally. So it's been a great benefit to me. So I hope I can share some of that with you today. And I must admit, I want to thank Dave, because Dave shared a little bit this morning about his trip to church. And it was a great example, a great example of a little bit of hunger coming in. And I'll talk more about that from a personal point of view later. But now, I don't think what I'm about to tell you is going to be controversial in any way. However, what I'm about to tell you is my views. They are my views, my opinions. If you don't share them or you don't agree, that's fine. But all I would say is, if you don't share them, find out for yourself. But I'm going to share with you my views today, so please take that on board. Now, if you remember last week, those of you who were here last week, Patrick actually spoke on what was quite a controversial subject, and or could have been. Now, we've discussed this in the management committee, sorry, the elders' meetings, and what we've decided to do is actually record these sermons and talks and put them on the website. So they will be available for you to re-listen to them at your own leisure. Now, this is important because most of these sermons and talks are in English, and a lot of you do not have English as your native language. So there can be a little bit lost or quite a lot lost in translation. So having them on the website means if you didn't quite grasp it, you can go to the website and re-listen. And listen and repeat the listening until you find you've got the message. We feel that's going to be good for you because then at least you'll have a chance to question it correctly by having heard it again and again. So I'm hoping, and this is my job to do this, so I'm hoping I'll have this up and running by this week. Okay, anger. So thank you to David. As I say, he set me up wonderfully. So let's go back 2,000 years. Solomon. We all know who Solomon was, David's father. And he wrote most of the Proverbs, we believe. And in Proverbs 14:30, Solomon says, "A tranquil heart makes for a healthy body." 1,000 years ago, Jesus wrote this, or said this, should I say, "Bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back." Now, I don't know about you, but this has always been a difficult scripture for me to read, basically because I couldn't understand how you could do this. If someone slaps you, how could you turn the other cheek? From a worldly point of view, the teachings of the world really do not promote this approach that Jesus is stating here. I mean, for example, Hollywood, the movies of Hollywood, make a fortune from movies all about revenge. I mean, you just think of the movies that you see, and how many are about revenge, getting your own back. But Jesus is telling us the opposite. So why? Why is this the case? So what about today? What about right up to date? And from the research that I've seen, this is just a snippet of some of the information. It says anger can shorten your life. If you're stressed and angry, you'll shorten your lifespan, says Fristad. A university study done over over a period of 17 years found that couples who hold in their anger have a shorter lifespan. Now, what it means by hold in their anger is to suppress, push down anger, to not deal with it, and in a lot of cases, to not even recognize it. So, 2,000 years ago, Solomon knew this. A tranquil heart makes for a healthy body. And obviously Jesus knew this because he was the one who created us. So he designed us, so he knows exactly what is right or wrong for us. So let's have a look at the definition of anger. Anger is a negative phenomenological internal feeling state. Oh, I don't understand that, do you guys? Let's have a look at this one. Anger. A strong feeling of displeasure or hostility. Anger is a negative feeling which often happens when a person thinks that someone or something has done wrong, bad, or that which puts them in danger. So anger is a negative feeling. That's better, isn't it? I can understand that. So why do we get angry? Right, so this is part of how we are wired. As I said, Jesus designed us. This is part of our design. Anger is a natural human emotion. It's part of the fight or flight instinct or reaction. As I said, God designed it into our bodies so that when we are faced with danger or threat, we can fight or we can decide to flee. So fight. Fight. The fight instinct is everything to do with anger. Now, to use an example, there's a lot of mothers in this room. And mothers or females don't tend to be the stronger of the two sexes. They tend to be the weaker, except when their children are threatened, when their babies are threatened. And I know full well that each and every mother in this room would fight if their child was threatened, physically threatened. They wouldn't flee, they would actually fight. Because anger would take over and they would, whatever the consequences, they would protect their young. Flight, on the other hand, is all to do with fear. Something threatens you, me. For example, if we came face to face with a grizzly bear, I know what I'd do. And I can't run very fast nowadays, but I'd certainly try my best. So we'd flee. So anger is built into us so that we can prepare for fight. Prepare for a fight. So anger prepares us to fight and fear prepares us to flee. And that was a quote by a guy called Chip Heath. The fight or flight response. Okay, what happens? What happens? Well, the body actually reacts to a perceived danger or a perceived threat. You can see down here, if I can get the thing, see down here, pupils dilate, we have a dry mouth, fast breathing, heart pounding, tense muscles, slow digestion, sweating of the palms. The amygdala reacts to the threat. That's part of our brain. But very simply, when we are faced with a situation which is threatening us, our system releases adrenaline. I'm sure you all know what adrenaline is. It's an agent which fills our body, and we are able to do things, run faster, move things. Our strength increases. It's an incredible drug. But the one which is least known is this one here, cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone. It's associated with adrenaline. But cortisol is apparently classed as public enemy or health public enemy number one because of the effect it has on the body. Well, in a situation like fight or flight, hopefully the situation is going to be dealt with in a relatively short space of time. We either fight or we flee and get out of danger. The body then, once safe out of that situation, the body then slowly returns to normal. And these drugs, I knew I was going to do that. These hormones and the adrenaline slowly go out of our body, and our body, as I say, returns to somewhat normal. But hold on, in this modern world, how often do we have to fight? I won't ask you when the last fight you had was. I can't remember. Certainly physical fight, I don't think I've had for about 50 years, but a verbal fight, that's different. But how often do we have to physically fight? Very rarely. So why do we get angry? Why do we get angry? So anger is a learned emotion, actually. It's instinctive. The true anger is instinctive. When faced with a threat, when faced with danger, if we're going to fight, anger is what we need to prepare us. But the anger we tend to suffer in today's life is learned. So we are wired for anger. That's how we are designed. We learn to become angry at or in situations that are not threatening to us physically. For example, children growing up in a household where one parent constantly berates and belittles the other learn to berate and belittle themselves. Then they often recreate, which means repeat, this behavior when they grow up and enter into relationships by berating and belittling their partners. So I can remember in my youth, when I was a kid, my mother and father and I observed them in how they reacted to certain situations. And certainly in my father's case, he was quite an angry man at times. And I found myself, as I grew older, reacting to similar situations that he did in the same way. I understand now that I was just following his lead. I thought that was normal, and so that was the way I reacted. It was only much later in life that I started to question it and realize that I was the one that was suffering, not, it didn't solve my problems. It just made them worse. But I was following my father's lead. Okay, now let's have a look at a list of some of the things that make us angry. When people chew their food loudly. When people talk loudly on the plane or in public places. Yeah, I can sympathize with that one. When a group of people walk slowly in front of you, blocking your path, isn't that annoying? And you, excuse me, and you start to get angry because they're oblivious to you. So we react to it wrongly. Here's a good one. when you have to untangle your headphones every time you use them. When someone tells you to calm down or cheer up even though you are completely fine. Isn't that maddening? When someone asks a question that was literally just answered. When someone touches your face for no reason. Oh, that's not good. Here's one that does annoy me. When someone hovers over your shoulder while you're working on the computer. When you stub your toe. I mean, yeah. But why do you get angry? I mean, it's painful, yes, but anger isn't going to solve it. Now, this is coming really close to home, this one. When people don't use their blinker when turning left or right. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about this. When someone doesn't say thank you after you do a service for them, that is very frustrating. And here's one which I think everybody hates. When the baby cries on an aeroplane or at the restaurant and parents don't do anything to shut them up. Anger just constantly builds and builds. Why don't they do something about this? Okay, let's go back, because I want to tell you about this one. And this was Dave this morning, wasn't it, Dave? Your experience, yeah? When I'm from UK, I've lived in France, I've lived in Australia. And in those countries, driving, there's a lot of pride in how people drive. And the way people drive mostly is predictable. When you're on the roads of the UK, people drive in a predictable fashion. They may not drive well at all times, but mostly it's predictable. And the same in Australia, the same in France. When I arrived in Penang, it was totally unpredictable. I'd never seen anything like it. I was so frustrated for weeks, and I would get angry. And I did. I became angry at the way people were driving. And my wife, she kept telling me to calm down. And I take notice of my wife sometimes. And she was constantly telling me to calm down. And I was thinking, Dennis, you're mature. You're a 60-year-old guy. You should know better than to get angry in these situations. Calm down. What I ended up doing was actually pushing my anger down. When I wasn't driving, I was fine. When I was driving, the littlest incident would set me off. And I'd do things, honk my horn, shake my fist, various other things I'm too embarrassed to tell you. And it was becoming a problem. Now, how I knew this was really becoming a problem was when one day I was out with friends, and the subject of driving in Penang came up as a topic. And we ranted and raved for 10, 15 minutes over dinner about drivers in Penang. And I thought, this can never be right. And as I say, when I was doing this research, I realized that I was actually suppressing my anger. My anger was becoming chronic, in that it was always there, and as soon as I got in my car, it would set me off again, and I would change my personality. And we'll be coming on to that in a moment. So, if we look at all those questions again, are any of them potentially harmful to us physically? Can all those things that all these things that make us angry, are they potentially harmful to us? Physically, they're not going to harm us at all. So, let's look at what's bad about anger. Apparently, the psychologists tell us there are 10 types of anger. Only one is considered positive. The rest are negative and potentially destructive. The most destructive anger is when we suppress it. And that's what I was just explaining to you about me and my anger with the drivers in Penang. Suppressing our anger can turn it into chronic anger. So that chronic anger, on the outside we appear normal. Inside, our subconscious perceives the danger is ever present. So our bodies continue to produce in small quantities the chemicals for fight or flight. Adrenaline, cortisol. Chronic anger is characterized by habitual irritation. The smallest things irritate us. When I was driving, anyone could set me off. Anything. Over time, this drip of adrenaline and cortisol within the body is extremely bad for us. It's like trying to drive your car with one foot on the gas pedal and one foot hard on the brake. What's going to happen? It's going to put tremendous strain on the car because the engine's trying to move it forward through the wheels, and you've got the front wheels braking you, so it's going nowhere. Back wheels spinning, the stress on the car is enormous. So imagine the same stress in your body. So the long-term effects include heart ailments, strokes, arthritis, ulcer, and depression. Every part of our body is affected in a negative way. Chronically angry, hostile, and irritable people have been described as having type A personalities. Have you heard that expression? Type A personalities? A lot of people are quite proud to be type A personalities. But it's documented that type A personalities have a higher early death rate than all other types. Interesting. So, anger is not at all good for us. What does the Bible have to say? Let's look at Ecclesiastes. Take away anger from your heart and remove distress from your body, for youth and the dawn are vanity. Ecclesiastes. Moreover, in all his days he heats in darkness, he is greatly irritated in sickness and anger. Proverbs. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. The discretion of a man defers his anger, and it is to his glory to pass over a transgression. So really the advice that the Bible is giving us is that we must control our feelings, certainly control anger. Now this one I want to focus on today. Ephesians 4:26. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. What this is effectively telling us is if you are angry, if you've had a fight with your spouse, with your children, with whoever else, you must not go to sleep still feeling angry. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. So if your last thoughts before falling asleep are ones of bitterness, revenge, hatred, and anger, your subconscious mind will process them, and they will possibly develop into chronic anger. Whatever we're thinking before we go to sleep, the brain processes. Our subconscious processes it. And it's a commonly accepted fact that our brain works extremely hard when we are sleeping. It's got the potential to solve problems. It's got the potential to heal our bodies. But we are the ones that program our brain. And if our brain is focused on anger, resentment, bitterness, before we go to sleep, our brain will process that overnight. So we will be affected by it next morning. So let's look at the scripture reading we had today. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations,' but you have made it a den of robbers." This is a vastly quoted scripture regarding anger. If you look it up, this is the one that comes up if you search the Bible. Jesus' anger, and it's labeled as righteous anger. However, in today's, in the modern world, we now call this, well, it's not the same as righteous anger. The only positive anger, is labeled as assertive anger. Now, assertive anger is recognized as being the only positive type of anger. Assertive anger is the most constructive type of anger expression. You use feelings of frustration or rage as a catalyst for positive change. Rather than avoiding confrontation or internalizing your anger, you express your anger in ways that create change in the world around you. So let's go back and look at Jesus. Actually, earlier in this scripture, in verse 11, we see that Jesus entered the temple, entered Jerusalem, and went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything. So he was in the temple courts. He looked around. He saw everything that was going on. But since it was late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. It was late in the day. So where was he going? The 12, and he went with the 12, should I say, to eat and to sleep. So I would say if Jesus did get angry, he got angry that night. When he entered the temple courts and he looked around. I would suggest that Jesus, that was the point at which he saw everything going on, the den of thieves as he called it, and he would become angry. But I believe, because he then went to Bethany to eat and sleep, that night I believe he prayed about his feelings and he was guided by his Father. He had dealt with his anger. It was gone before he slept. He then knew what he had to do. His actions next day were not the result of a fit of spontaneous rage. So when we read that scripture, we often think he went in there, lost it totally, and then started to use violence to get rid of everybody from the court, the temple court. I'm suggesting that he wasn't angry next day. He'd slept on it, but he'd had a solution. He and his Father had come up with a plan of action. So he was no longer angry that night. So he wasn't suffering from a fit of spontaneous rage. He was simply asserting and demonstrating his and his Father's disapproval in a way that sent an everlasting message. Because we still talk about this event today, after 2,000 years. So that was a message which has gone through time, and we still talk about it. Later in Mark, it says here, they arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you authority to do this?" Jesus replied, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin? Tell me." They discussed it amongst themselves and said, "If we say from heaven," he will ask, "then why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin," they feared the people, for everyone held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We don't know, Jesus." And Jesus said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." So the way that Jesus handled those challenges from the chief priests does not suggest he was angry. That was a rational mind answering those questions. The way he structured his approach to those chief priests stymied them. They could not get the better of him, which is what they intended. His anger had been converted into a plan for constructive action, and then it had disappeared. He was able to engage the chief priests in a dialogue that was formed from sound and logical mind and not tainted by anger or resentment. Okay, to wrap up now, basically what I'm saying to you is that there's two approaches to anger. And we see here the relaxation response or the fight or flight response. If we are relaxed, we have a reduced heart rate, lower blood pressure, relaxed muscles, increased brain oxygen. The effect of that is we are able to be creative, we are under low stress, and we're receptive to lots of things around us, and we learn. On the other hand, if we take the fight-flight or the anger, it increases our heart rate, it increases our blood sugar, our blood peripherals, rapid breathing, and the effect of that is poor communication, high stress, aggression, poor focus and retention. Now, I'm sure if you are honest with yourself, when you think back to the last time you were really angry, I am, irrational. When I'm in the car getting angry at the Penang drivers, I am irrational. My wife can't talk to me. We can't have a conversation because I'm too consumed in the threat I'm perceiving is there. Is this familiar? I think most of us can say yes. I won't ask for a show of hands, by the way. So unfortunately, I haven't got I don't know the person who wrote this, but I found this very impressive. So it says, there is nothing you can do angry that you can't do better when not angry. Anyone can be angry, that's easy. You don't even have to work on it. It's involuntary. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not easy. So, conclusion. Anger is mostly destructive. Sorry. And this is the point I want to make this morning. I want to leave you with. Unrecognized anger is mostly destructive. To your health, to families, to children, to relationships, to jobs. First step to control your anger. To recognize when we are becoming angry. To consciously identify what is happening to us. Now, here's the key message. If we can recognize when we're becoming angry, if we can consciously identify what is happening to us, it gives us the opportunity to choose. To choose to continue to be angry, or to choose to begin calming down. So it's the ability to recognize what is happening to you, and then to choose how you do continue reacting. Proverbs 19:11. A wise man restrains his anger and overlooks insults. This is to his credit. So we've seen what Jesus has done, what his reaction to a very, we know what the temple courts looked like in those days. What I am saying is I don't believe he was angry. He may have got angry, but he didn't sleep on that anger, and he had a plan. Proverbs, Solomon, and Ecclesiastes, these are all telling us, let's choose to begin calming down when we recognize that we are angry. And then, peace. Okay, so I hope you've got something out of that. Thank you for listening. So, Dave?
For our closing song, last week Dennis told me he was going to speak about anger.